evening, good evening. Thank you very much and welcome to the Caring View. If you haven't already, please do head over to our YouTube and hit the bell, which is somewhere on your screen, and hit subscribe so you're notified about any of the upcoming webinars and podcasts that we're doing. Before I begin, just a shout out to our sponsors who you'll see ticking along the bottom. So we've got Prosperwell, the leading digital marketing agency for social care. We've got CBAT, Care Business Associate Training, who can provide all your training needs. And we've also got Attis Care Insurance brokers who provide comprehensive care coverage and proactive risk management solutions. You can find out more and see all of our latest podcasts, some of our shows at www.thecaringview.co.uk. Well, that's out of the way. So tonight we're talking about employee resilience and nurturing and empowering positive mental health. So it is Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and I'm delighted to be joined by Lucy and Faye. Good evening, both of you. How are you?
Good.
Good. I'm still kind of boogieing to that intro music.
I was there the whole time.
Oh no, I like it. It's only I think it's about 3 or 4 weeks old. So Adam and I, one of us comes up with an idea and we just run with it, and we're our own worst enemies. But yeah, we're keeping it changing all the time, keep people on their toes. So you've both been on the show before, but for anybody that doesn't know you, are you able just to introduce yourself and say who you are? We'll come to you first, Lucy.
So Lucy Buxton from LJB Coach Consultancy. I'm a nurse, a coach, a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming and a trainer of hypnotherapy. And I've also got a little side business where I coach young people as well. So that's me.
Thank you very much. And Faye, over to you.
Hello. I'm Faye Mell, the owner and managing director of Cata Care. So we are a care management solutions business. So we've got a team of 6 at head office, and we also have a larger team in the field of up to kind of 100 care consultants, registered managers, directors, CQC inspectors, and we kind of fill gaps in the care industry where there's a need, whether it's operations, marketing, business development, or care quality. So yeah, it's a bit about me.
Thank you very much. So I thought before we begin, I'd just go through some mental health stats, and then Lucy, I thought I'd hand over to you just to see what you're kind of currently seeing in social care in and around mental health. So the latest stats are 1 in 6.8 people. I don't know why they don't just say 1 in 7. People experience mental health problems in the workplace, so 14.7% of our workforce in the UK. Women in full-time employment are nearly twice as likely to have a common mental health problem as full-time employed men. The ratio is 19.8% versus 10.9%. Mental health accounts for 12.7% of all sickness and absence days in the UK now, and the estimated cost to employers due to mental health-related absence is now £7.9 billion. An astronomical amount there, and some shocking figures. But Lucy, what are you seeing as a mental health and wellbeing practitioner in the social care space at the moment?
So this year's been a bit different for me in the sense that I have seen more people reaching out for help. And the pattern is that they've been through struggles, but they've kind of gone, oh, it'll get better. They've kind of gone, oh, okay, I'll go on and do this. Things get a bit better for a little bit of a time, and then they end up, needing help again. So I'm seeing that. And actually, strangely interesting listening to those statistics, is it that social care is predominantly more of a female workforce? But actually, I find that I have more female clients. And that's not because I market to females. It might be that it's an unconscious thing to get far more inquiries from females. And yeah, I think there's folk are getting to the point where it's like, well, I've got to do something or I've got to walk away. Also, what I'm seeing is far more with not just kind of senior management, registered manager kind of level, seeing far more struggles with the teams and a lot of sickness. And a lot of like kind of odd days of sickness, but also how that's playing out, I guess, in a compliance perspective. like lack of attention to detail, then it kind of impacting on poor cultures, you know, kind of teams not following instructions and not working together effectively.
Yeah, no, and I guess that there's definitely a lot more awareness now, isn't there, around mental health, and the stigma. I think it's still there to somewhat, but I think it's definitely been reduced a lot before. Like when we think about maybe 5-10 years ago, I think people are a lot more open. You spoke there around kind of the compliance and the attention to detail. Faye, I was just wondering, are you noticing that from obviously the consulting side around managers and maybe some of your staff that are supporting homes or services?
Yeah, I mean, I've just had a conversation actually at the end of today before this call with somebody looking for another job, left with no notice, like absolute kettle about to boil because they just weren't supported by senior management. And we see that quite a lot. And it does trickle down to the rest of the team, doesn't it? And then affects the care, affects the quality. You know, things go by the wayside because I've seen it like with me and my team sometimes, you know, when your mental health's not doing well because work is massively impacted. So yeah, and I think the stats with women, like Lucy said, it's predominantly, you know, I don't know how many women work in the care sector, but it's a large percentage of the sector. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. And then, you know, a lot of the extra stresses and hormones that women have that men don't, and we still live in an era where mums stay at home with children more, all those kind of different things. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And one thing I wrote down to discuss tonight was around the pandemic. So I alluded there 5-10 years ago, actually, there was that stigma, and now it's obviously broken down a lot more. One question we had on a Facebook group when we shared the event tonight was around the people need to stop talking about the pandemic as being the increase of mental health, and actually we need to now just address it and move forward and draw a line under the. What are your thoughts? And I'll come to both of you on that. Should we be actually being aware of the pandemic, the impact that had, or should we now think actually it's now been whatever it is, 2-3 years down the line, actually it's time to draw a line under that, start afresh, move forward? Lucy, I'll come to you first, because I know that you obviously do a lot of work around kind of trauma and historic trauma and bits and pieces. So it'd be interesting to see your take on this.
Okay, so I'm not going to use this as a direct comparison. So I think I need to be mindful how I say this. But how many years on are we since the end of the Second World War and we're still talking about it?
Yeah.
So fundamentally what I'm saying is the world went through a really traumatic period of time. And it may be that for some people that they have dealt with that. It may be that for some people, it didn't impact them as much as the next person. It may be that for some people, the experience that they went through, they just locked it away in a box. They shut a door on it because they couldn't go there. They couldn't look. And now they're having to deal with that. It's that stuff is popping up and they're needing to deal with it. Fundamentally, stigma around mental health or the seeking out of support for any condition, health, physical, emotional, has to be, people have to feel that they're in an environment where they're supported to ask those questions, to say how they feel, and for them to know that their feelings are valid. And how I experienced the pandemic will be completely different to how you experienced it. And for me, it might be that it's right for me not to talk about it. It might be that it's right for you to talk about it, because fundamentally we're all very different.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And Faye, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. So I was really lucky, I suppose, in the pandemic. I learned lots of different things about myself. And during that, I stood up to certain, I don't know, people that I worked with and said, this isn't right. This isn't how we should be doing things. That also empowered my team when we kind of got together and we've had this conversation where we've said, actually, we do need to prioritize mental health, and the pandemic showed us that. And I think we do need to still talk about it. So there's a generation of young people, 18 to 20-year-olds who missed out on like key years at school and all that kind of, like, you know, we have an 18-year-old working with us at Catacare, and yeah, it's like 3 years, 4 years, really, such a huge time in their life. And they've missed out on friendships, they've missed out on proms, they've missed out on all that kind of last bit of the GCSEs properly, and those huge kind of development years that you can never get back. And then that comes into the workplace. So, you know, when we were 18, 19, starting work looks very different to 18-year-olds joining the workplace now. So there's potentially a lot of, you know, young care staff that have come out of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden they're in the working world. They haven't had the kind of normal transition from school to whatever. And yeah, it's scary, really. Yes, we need to get on with it. Yes, we need to find the solutions and talk about that. But I think it's still something we do need to talk about. And like Lucy said, you know, this is one of these worldwide things that was just so huge to all of us, and it still pops up. We said it earlier, didn't we, Mark? Oh, I'm not feeling well. Is it COVID? You know, like, it still comes up.
Yeah.
There was an article in the paper yesterday that some GP surgeries are reintroducing face masks because of whooping cough. And immediately I read the title of the article, but my brain skipped all of the information, and my brain read they're introducing face masks because of increasing COVID. That's the impact that this has had on my brain.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you just said, I read an article literally just before we went live and you guys joined, was around, I'm pretty sure it was in Devon, there's an outbreak of something in the water, or somewhere up that way, or down that way, depending on where you are. But instantly I thought, I mean, the articles, they use the titles, don't they? They're catchy titles to draw you in. And yeah, I think you do go straight there thinking, oh, is it an outbreak of COVID again? Faye, I think you touched on a good point there around the younger generation, because I think they're often quite missed. I think the ones that were in the sector at the time have that support, or should have that support, but actually we don't factor in actually those that were in school, were in college, that are now coming into employment, and actually how that's been. And then for some people, maybe not so much social care, but for a lot of people, actually working from home and then not understanding kind of the workplace and who people really are and getting to know people. Do you think that employees have a clear understanding of the resources and services available when we talk about kind of that young, I mean, anybody, but that younger workforce as well?
I think some do, some don't want to. No.
And some employers don't always make that, you know, if we're just talking about the workplace, some employers don't make that available.
I think there's a school of thought around, for some employers, I pay you, what more do you want? I think there are some employers that go above and beyond and are really supportive. And I think there are some employers that are getting there. There are those that are doing bits, that want to do more. And yes, I appreciate that it fundamentally, you know, it's about the impact on the bottom line. And I don't necessarily know that people can see that the impacts, you know, if I pay out an amount to my manager to work with Lucy, will that be able to be seen on the bottom line? I mean, fundamentally, I had a registered manager that I was speaking to the other day. I've been supporting the home that they've just gone to work in. And I said, well, I've got this pot of hours left. Do you want that for one-to-one coaching for you? And she went, oh, well, us as registered managers know it's a really lonely place. And that's not something I have ever been asked before. Now, this is a manager who's been in the sector for a long time. So her words were, I need to reflect on that to see if that's something that benefit me, because she's never been offered it before. I think that's quite sad.
No, definitely. And I think that's quite common. I think I often speak about, actually, I think that a lot of the time it's the registered managers doing really good work with their staff teams, but actually the support that they get from above isn't the same. It's not, and it has to come from the top. And I do want to talk about how we embed a culture and that employee resilience. But before I do, I want to talk around kind of, both of you are self-employed, and there will be people here that are self-employed. Lucy, I'll come to you first. What tips do you have for looking after your own mental health? What have you implemented that works well that other people could think, oh, actually, I could try that, or some key takeaways for them?
Okay. So I use everything that I teach my clients. If I feel something is off with me, I tune into that. I know where I have a snapshot of me in a good place. So I know when there's a difference with me and I pay attention to that. So there's all those things that, my go-to is I walk the dog. If I've been at my computer and something's happened or there's a feeling or something, I walk my dog. I reduce down my time on social media. I know that I matter. Something I've recently done is that I have changed my diary so that I have a week where I coach and a week where I don't coach, because I found I was spending a lot of time working in the business, not having the time to work on the business. I have a business coach that helps me put my thoughts and where I want to go with my business somewhere. I have a space that's safe that I can go to. Fundamentally, I realise that I am the most important person in my world, and the relationship I have with me is the most important relationship I'll ever have. Because if I don't nurture me first, I can't then give to others. So yeah, if there's something in my world that might be making me wobble a little bit, I go, okay, what do I need? How do I need to support me? And that might just mean, like this afternoon, I knew I was on here this evening, so I'm a bit tired. So I thought, I know what, that's dog cuddle time on the sofa, a weighted cuddle. Perfect.
No, thank you very much. And yeah, I too love getting outside in nature, walking the dog. I always take a photo or two, but I try not to be on my phone too much and just enjoy what's around.
I leave my phone at home.
I'll see. I don't. But yeah,
I'm trying to do that. I'm going away this weekend for a long weekend in the countryside in Wales, and I think I'm going to leave my phone at home.
Even if you take your phone, you won't have signal there.
True, yeah.
I've had a word and got them to take the mast down.
It is literally in the middle of nowhere anyway, so yeah, I don't think I'm going to take my phone and just like really switch off and do what I know, all the things that I like. I like journaling. I have a couple of like really good journaling apps and like mood tracker apps that I've started using, because I naturally am very like all or nothing, and it's trying to find balance rather than getting to that burnout stage and going, now I need to ring Lucy, and trying to manage those bits in between. So using like the little apps, going outside more this time of year helps loads. Like winter is tough. And yeah, deleting the apps off my phone. Like it's so easy to have a really hard day at work and then just lay down and scroll TikTok for 5 hours. But I know that's bad for my mental health. Cutting down on coffee is another. I have a habit of drinking coffee. If I have one, I have 7. Cutting down on that and then realizing, oh, okay, I'm not as jittery and hyper, she says with the coffee here. But yeah, it's finding what you love that feels like little productive things to care for yourself outside of the workplace. And I think employers should be promoting that as well. There's so many great little apps out there and free spaces that you can go to, because I get that that's another thing in it. The cost of living's shockingly expensive, and especially care workers might not be able to afford to go out every weekend and have meals and stuff. So it's kind of finding free places where you can go out and enjoy, like going for a walk, going into nature, hiking. All those different things are just great for your mental health. And I always say when I'm feeling rubbish, have you drank some water today? Yes. Have you had a good night's sleep? I think so. Have you eaten anything? No. All right. Okay. Maybe we should eat. Have you done, just kind of all those little self-check-ins really help. I
think that's a fantastic thing to do as a routine thing. You wake up in the morning and actually, how many of us, the first thing we do is reach over and look at the phone? So I was listening to a podcast the other day with a lady who was a doctor. She's a neuroscientist. And she was saying that she wakes up in the morning and she has a gratitude routine. So she is, I'm thankful for my silk pillow. I'm thankful for my sheets. I'm thankful for a good night's sleep. And she does all of that. Her phone is nowhere near her room. And she doesn't go anywhere near her phone until she has got her first drink of the day in her hand. She allows herself to have that space for herself that works for her. And I think what's really key is I can sit here and say what works for me. We can all say what works for us, but it's about the individual identifying what works for them, what helps them feel good, and them being responsible for implementing that in their day. Just because I think that walking the dog's good for me doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for somebody else.
No, like my husband loves gaming, and he can spend hours and hours and hours. I like gaming sometimes on my laptop, but my laptop for me is a workspace. So then gaming still feels a bit like I'm sat at work, whereas he can just get lost in it for hours, and it's so good for him. He's, you know, achieving things while he's gaming. It's relaxing for him. So, whereas for me, that's not a relaxing, good mental activity, staring at a screen again after I've been on a screen all day. So like you say, what's good for one is not necessarily for another. And it's finding what you like doing and making that into a thing that you do at the end of the day or in the morning. Like I love doing like tarot cards and anything spiritual and stuff like that. That's just great. I'm like, tell me my future cards, you know, what's going on. And that just, it helps. I don't know why, but it does.
So we spoke earlier around leadership and management, and it's got to be embedded. And I want to talk around how we embed a culture of mental health. So what advice do you have for managers, leaders that want to create something, might have something but want to building it, to really truly embed it into their culture? Because obviously it's got to start from the top. So it can't really be the registered manager that's implementing it. I think it needs to be somebody either external coming into your service if you haven't got anybody above you, or it needs to be coming from that director, senior level team. What tips, advice do you both have around that? And if you have got any questions or anything, please do drop them into the comments. Lucy, I'll come to you first.
So I would fundamentally ask, the first question is, well, why? Why are you wanting to do this? What is the objective that you're trying to achieve? For what purpose? Is it that you are seeing a high level of sickness that has causes that are potentially related to emotional or thought kind of generated illnesses or states? And it's about the business actually investing and buying into and committing to doing something that will help and to meet that purpose. Because it's all very well and good saying, oh, we want to do something, and then putting a poster on the wall, because it changes nothing. Lip service will do more damage than good. So if you're going to do it, you have to have a plan. You have to decide what your options are, why what route you're going to take, and what your outcome, you want to create. If you're not going to do it wholeheartedly and invest in doing it, then don't bother, because that in itself is counterintuitive. If I tell people I'm going to support them and give them that space in the environment that they're in, and then as a business that doesn't happen, I don't give them the recognition, I don't give them psychological safety because I'm still shouting at them, if I don't help them feel included, because actually, I've highlighted their neurodivergence, or it might be that I'm not even giving them the recognition for the fact that they haven't had a day off sick this month. Do you know what? You're not going to go all in. Don't bother.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And just listening to you there. No, it's all good. I think listening to you there around sickness, there will be providers that know that they've got maybe higher than sickness than they might have had in the past. And you've got to track that and what the reasons are, because I think that's the only way that you can identify whether mental health is an underlying cause. And again, whether your staff team feel able to be open and honest about actually it was my mental health, and they're not just saying that it was something else and covering that up.
Yeah, exactly.
Faye,
And that's
what would your tips be? And also keeping in mind that obviously well, I say recently, but it probably is not as recent as it is in my mind, obviously started your own business. And you spoke earlier around the number of employees you've got. How have you embedded that into your workplace?
So I'm a massive advocate for looking after your mental health and the teams. I've seen firsthand how it can affect business in a really negative way when employees aren't supported. I've been there in the past where I've not openly felt comfortable to talk about my mental health. So I've lied and made up other excuses. And that is the last thing I'd want for anybody, because it just feels gross to do that. It's not nice, especially when you're suffering with mental illness. So yeah, I just talk about it really openly in my business. And when we got to a point where we could afford, we brought in the lovely Lucy Buxton, and she's our wellbeing partner, and she's doing loads of one-to-one sessions and different personalized programs with the team. Because however, I always say, come knock on my door. It's an open door policy. Yes, we all work remotely, but open my teams. I'm always there to chat. But sometimes you don't want to talk to your manager. You want to talk to somebody in a different safe space, somebody that's qualified to ask the right questions. Yes, I can listen, but I probably might not be able to help. So that's why we brought Lucy in. So I would always recommend, unless you have that specialist internally, bring in somebody external that can offer that personalized program based on what that person's going through, where they are now, where they want to be in 12 months, where I want that person to be in 12 months, what the growth plans are, all those different kind of things. And then what we're going to be doing is kind of a bit of a survey. Like, what do people, like we were talking about earlier, like what we all find helpful. So Lucy does hypnosis sessions for me and records them. So we're going to kind of start a little library of that. And then just all of the different things to support people with the mental health. And we're just going to build a big kind of library of all these wonderful resources. So that's great, because then people can just tap into it anytime. If they're having they've had a few meetings on a morning, or they've, whatever, they can just go on the phone and be like, even if you're in your car, I'm just going to sit in my car, have a hypnosis for 10 minutes and then crack on with my day. And just little things like that. Great.
I'm pleased you spoke there around external support, because I think that's something that we don't necessarily have in social care on like a wider percentage of care providers. How's that transformed your team? For anybody thinking, actually, we might have somebody in-house, or it might be the registered manager, or it might be somebody that's got a passion for mental health. How's that transformed kind of the support available to your staff team?
I feel like some people in the team are becoming much more self-aware, which is always really important. And then just really thinking about the personal lives as well, and what they want to become as a person, and identifying that actually this morning routine, for example, isn't quite right for how I want to spend my day. And how we set as morning is just the tone for the rest of the day, isn't it? So it's like Lucy's been working to do things in bite-sized steps, so it's really manageable. And the team are kind of coming out of these sessions, and I'm seeing huge differences. And the consultants that work with us as well. We're bringing in more business. We're doing better work. We're not getting any complaints. Just loads of different wonderful things like that. The feedback we get from the people that have worked with Lucy, the feedback's great, and the clients the clients that have worked with the team members that Lucy's worked with, that feedback's just phenomenal. And I've seen like really big changes in people. And I've personally worked with Lucy for a couple of years now, and seen huge changes. Like I'd have never done this 2 years ago. Anxiety, just no way. So yeah, and I've grown a business over the last 2 years. There you go. That's an outcome from working with a wellbeing professional.
100%. And Lucy, from an employer's point of view, if they come and use you like Faye is doing, what is the kind of the back end support to employers? Do you feed back on how many people have reached out to you? Kind of how does that work in the background so that employees know maybe that they're getting value for money, or that actually people are using it as an initiative? And obviously Faye spoke there around actually you need to review and collate surveys and feedback and bits and pieces. But what do you do in the back end?
So it depends on what service that I run in the first place. So I've had numerous ways people have come to me. I've had people who've been on long-term sick, and actually I've supported them when they've returned to work, and that's actually enabled them to settle into their role and stay in the workplace. I've had employers come to me and say, my registered manager's not doing well, I need them to have some support. And then I've coached the registered manager and actually gone on to work with the team. I've also worked with other teams where they've had some real challenges with compliance, where they've had the compliance intervention, but where the team had become really disconnected, really kind of, they'd turned into themselves, weren't engaging, weren't talking to anybody, weren't even offering visitors cups of teas. And one business comes to mind that I'm coming to the end of working with, who I've seen a dramatic change, where when I first went there, the staff kind of, it was like tumbleweed. They just kind of disappeared into rooms, and I was actually told that they thought I was a spy for the company. And they've been able to have a space where I visited them every few weeks, and they can just talk to me. And then I've been able to get their feedback from the company. I've been a bridge between the two and been able to provide that feedback to the company so that the senior management team and the owners have been able to reflect on where they're at and where they're going. And actually, we've been able to get the home to the point where the business was, I would say, a red light kind of home with regards to lots of eyes on it from like regulators and local authorities and stuff, to the point where actually now it's what I would say is a green light home, and they're filling up and it's lovely. And the staff now are like, somebody actually said to me last week, they said, are we going to see you again? I said, oh, you may not. And they were like, can't believe that. You walk in and you're like a ray of sunshine. And it's because I've held a space for them. They've been seen, they've been heard. I've been able to take their feedback. I haven't allowed them to sit there in a pity party. They've had to look at where they're part of the problem and where they need to take responsibility for themselves as a team. And they've been able to change. And I have seen dramatic sicknesses coming down. Agency has gone from like, I'd go in and there was agency everywhere, to whereas I'm now, it's like one agency member of staff for like a big home. Yeah, massive, absolutely massive changes. And fundamentally, it will pay out long term because staff will be happier, the outcome will be happier. There was something I saw the other day about people plus environment equals outcome. And there's a model by the chap by the name of Dilts, who talks a lot about the environment that we sit in. And if I put a seed in old compost and I don't water it and I don't give it the right amount of warmth or sunlight, it's just not going to grow, is it? And it's no different to people. They're not in the right environment where they're seen, they're heard, they're acknowledged, they're communicated to as adults, then people start running patterns of behaviour that aren't particularly healthy.
No, definitely. And I think quite a few bits there to kind of digest. And I think you touched there on about actually the red light service, and it's now a green light, and linking it back to that framework. And obviously we know that wellbeing is such a massive element of the new single assessment framework with the CQC. And it will be the framework with other regulators in other parts of the UK. And actually doing something now isn't a nice to have, it's an essential, because that's what you're going to be inspected on and what you're doing and what processes you have and the outcomes. And talking about outcomes, it's not just your staff team, it's also the people you're supporting. And actually, if they feel supported, they're more likely to support the people they're looking after better. But also if those people that they're looking after have poor mental health, they might have picked up some tips or something that they've done that's worked really well for them, that they can also offer advice to that person, especially if they're living on their own and they're isolated and that's the only person they see all day. Actually re-enabling them and getting maybe back into the garden can make all the difference to someone.
I think there's a couple of points there to think about. We talk a lot about mental well-being, and I mean, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. But actually, well-being isn't just about your mental health. It's about your emotional health. It's about your physical health. It's about the environmental health that you sit in. It's about the social health you have, your connections with other people. And it's also about your financial health. And it only takes a couple of those pillars to be out of kilter for it to kind of play out in one way or another. Now, it might be for somebody that it plays out in their mood. You know, it could be that they're experiencing signs of kind of depression, but for somebody else, it might be that they're getting more chest infections. For somebody else, it might be that they're actually not managing to pay their bills because they're overspending. And it's about a holistic approach. There's also something mentioned earlier about how leaders are and how. So if I walk my dog and I'm anxious and I hold that lead really tightly and I'm a bit twitchy, then the dog gets a bit twitchy. He can feel my mood down the lead. It's no different to care environments. It's no different to home environments. And ultimately, those chemicals that are produced through those situations of fight, fright, freeze or fawn, adrenaline and cortisol, it leaks out of our body and we pick up on it. Our body language changes. We notice subtle changes in other people, which then will mean that we will interact differently, which means we will interact with our peers differently and those we care about, which fundamentally impact the outcomes of the care business.
No, definitely. And I'm pleased you touched there on the financial pillar, because it was something I had written down when we were talking about the plan earlier on. Because one of the questions I wanted was, how long should that plan take to implement? Because like you just mentioned, there's 4, 5, 6 different pillars that you need to consider. And you obviously can't just dive straight in and implement all of it. Otherwise, you're not going to implement it properly. How long would you say, and Faye, obviously you can come in there around kind of what you've done with your team and experience. How long would you say that plan should take to implement fully and embed it into that culture?
So I would say that there's no should or doing it in a certain period of time, because everybody's different. Every business is different. You'll have businesses that pick it up and run with it and businesses that are less likely to pick it up and run with it. You know, we all know that we have people who are influencers. We know that there'll be people who are blockers. And everybody's situation is different. How you're going to change something in an adequate rated service to somebody who's an outstanding rated service is completely different. Outstanding, they've got a growth mindset. They're more likely to grab it and run with it. Whereas an inadequate rated service, they're probably going to be a lot more fear driven. So they're going to have a far longer period to be able to build up trust. And that needs to be about honesty. It's also about priorities. So it might be that actually what we need to do is get attendance in first. We need to reduce down the agency cost, which then means we've got more money in the pot, which means we can put wages up. But to be able to do that, we need to see where the priorities are. So one of the biggest priorities for this home that I've been working with was recognition of them as individuals. They needed to be seen. They needed to hear what other people appreciated about them. And actually, we were able to work out that it wasn't necessarily training that they needed. They needed space for them. And they literally turned up at this home. I took a book and I would be like, right, I'm in this room. I'm here if you want to come and talk to me. And bit by bit, somebody would go, Lucy's in the building today. We made sure that they all knew. They needed that. That's taken 3 months of my time, you know, their time as a business time. They've now got a plan of how they need to move that forward. They've got online training, which I've written for them, which they can engage in. Now, some people will pick that up and run with it. Other people will be longer. So I think you can say, I might like to do it by this. But it's also, you're never done until you're done. And we're fundamentally always evolving. As an individual, I'm always learning more. I'm challenging myself. I'm clearing up stuff. I have just been through a massive thing over the last 3 weeks of my life on a personal level. And that pushed me down a rabbit hole of reading a book. And reading the book was a lot around my work as an individual. And I realised I'd been hoarding clothes that I'd had for like 10, 20 years because I didn't see or place the value in me enough to know that, actually, you know what? I wouldn't put a 5-year-old in a baby's clothes, would I? So why should I put myself at pushing very, very near 50-year-old woman in clothes that I wore when I was 32, 33, 34? You know what? I've got a massive bin liner in the garage now, ready to go onto Etsy for somebody else. And I've got a whole bin liner full of shoes that I can't wear anymore. So I was only going to get there when I was ready to get there.
There is definitely something about decluttering. I love cleaning. And I do all the cleaning in my house, but there is something about then when you finished and you go, it just frees your mind, and it's really bizarre. And it's always the bathroom that's the biggest one. I don't know why. Even if I don't like we've got a bath in our bath, when nobody ever uses the bath, but even when you've cleaned it, think it's the smell. It's just everything's in its place. There's nothing. Yeah, there's definitely something around decluttering.
You'd probably say it's something around like maybe the energy transfer. And I mean, I don't know anything about feng shui, but fundamentally there's so much energy around us, and we are energy, aren't we? And if we're not in, I guess, an energetic alignment as such, we're not in flow, we're not able to then do things. And we know how much an environment changes. Say, for example, there's not enough airflow in the room, then, you know, we get mold build up and damp and condensation, and we know how that impacts on our physical well-being. So it actually stands to reason that clutter impacts us on a whole holistic level.
No, definitely. Faye, coming back to the business plan side of things, what would your advice be, or what do you recommend to your consultants that they do? Maybe if they're working with a service that needs to implement something and looking at doing something or embedding it more, what do you look at and kind of make sure that it's definitely in there, the timescales from your point of view?
Kind of going back to what Lucy said, so say we're in an inadequate service, that's going to be a 12-month plan. Say we're working with an outstanding service, we might only be in there, you know, a couple of days a week for 3 months. It really depends, because these, you know, those teams are in very, very different places. These are still in like fear, fight, firefighting mode, and these are like in that growth mindset. So they're already at that level you need them to be to take on board, you know, the kind of work that Lucy does, for example. And if so, when it comes to, so say we go into a care home or a service, and there are problems with, there's a little fly. There are problems with quality. There's generally a problem with the team, and that's kind of where we have to look, because if the manager says, I'm doing absolutely everything, there's no support from above, there's not really any support from below, but it's like kind of empowering the manager to empower the team and get the team involved. Like we always say, do you have a like a care management software champion? Instead of you doing it all, Mr. Care Manager, why don't you, you know, identify a couple of seniors that are really good at that? Who goes out and does the business development and networking? Why don't you identify a couple of people, rather than you taking all of it on and then having to answer to the investors why you haven't brought any new clients in this month? It's just kind of, and if the team aren't mentally well, they're not going to be on board and go above and beyond, because, you know, it's care, and it unfortunately is really underpaid.
No, there's definitely something there around effective delegation, and you haven't got to delegate everything, Dan. It's the way that you do it. But you are right. I think the manager holds everything, probably because also they need to double check that the work's being done. And I think when I speak to a lot of managers, they think, well, if I'm double checking anyway and it's not done properly, I might as well just do it myself. But it is around that art of delegation and how you do it. And I think that's one of the skills as a manager, that you've probably come from being a frontline operational staff, and you've been really good at that, and you're really passionate, and you've worked your way up. But actually there's no training in place of actually all those leadership things that you then have to do. And I think they then take it all on, take on too much, and then they get to a point where actually they're close to burnout before alarm bells then go. But it's also the impact to the service. If that manager goes off on sick leave, even for a week, but a prolonged period of time, actually if they're doing everything, then that stops that second that person's not in the home.
Like we got to a point. Go on, Lucy.
I think this takes us back full circle in the conversation to where we started off with. So if we go back to kind of the pandemic, there was so much fear. And because people are running on so much fear still, managers hold on to things because they need to be safe. So I can't delegate, because if I delegate, I know that they won't do it, or they won't do it as quickly or as effectively as I do it. So it might just be easier that I take it on, and then that way I remain safe.
Faye, were you going to come in before?
Yeah. What were I going to say?
I was going to say, do you remember what you were going to say?
I think I was probably going to say I got to a point in business where we went from a team of 2 to a team of 6 really quickly, and I was like, okay, you know, this team now can take everything out of my head And I need to now delegate it to these people and get it down into systems and software and actually let go of some things. Yes, I still know what's going on within the business all the time because I'm a bit controlling like that. But, you know, people now have jobs that I used to do and I'm not involved in certain parts of the business. And that probably took a bit of work with Lucy and probably, you know, 3 months for me to be able to let go of that. And it does start at that top level. It really, really does start with the owners of the business and the directors and the managers, however many kind of seats there are at the top. Because if not, it's just never going to trickle down, ever.
No, absolutely. Go on, Lucy, I can see you want to come in.
It's me and my brain. I've got light bulbs going up all over the place. So I think based on what Faye has said, and this is a really hard thing for people to hear. So Nick has just said, also some people struggle to realise that if you delegate, there's a good chance something will be done in a different way to how you would do it. It takes confidence to step back and reflect on it. Still delivers the desired outcome 100%, because fundamentally we've all got to accept that we all have a different model of the world. The way that we do things is very different. You know, how I might see something is very different. So that's where if you have an incident in a home and you ask 5 people who witnessed the incident, if they all write the same statement, you know that they're not telling the truth because they'll all see it differently. My point was around owners and leaders in businesses, and this is a less easy thing to do. When there's a problem in the business, one of the key things that we need to do is to ask, how am I part of the problem? And that is something that is often not done. And it's so easy to point that finger of blame, but when we do, 3 fingers point back. And doing some mirror work, actually looking at that reflection and going, okay, so if there's a problem in my business, I'm the only person in my business. I can't blame anybody else. I can only look and go, well, that looks like a me problem, so I better do something about it. And that's where businesses need to stop pointing the finger at staff that don't do things properly and actually sit there and go, well, why are they not doing things properly? How are we not enabling them to do things properly and actually taking some responsibility?
You know, definitely. And Faye, is that something that you do, reflective work there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I try. Yeah, you know, at the end of the day. But yeah, and we have a really open culture at Catacare. So there's none of that closed door, things are going on at the top and you'll find out later. You know, include everybody in decision making. And I think that's really important because everybody's like, I want to work hard for this business. I appreciate that you appreciate me. Can I take Friday afternoon off? Yes, of course you can. But yeah, when things go wrong, I have to look in the mirror and go, why? I can't blame my new members of staff who are just still being onboarded and trained. It's still on my, you know, on my shoulders really, in it as a business owner, and I have to take responsibility. And it's hard. It's not nice. But yeah, that's why we have a wellbeing partner, because then I can kind of go and vent. And then Lucy says, well, what's the purpose? And why don't we find a solution to that?
I was going to say the big question of why.
Yeah, why? Yeah.
I tend not to ask why. I tend to ask them in different ways. It's a why disguised as something else. Because if I ask why, I might get a defensive answer, and that's not really what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And it's about what's below that, to be honest. And it's about getting to the root cause. Yeah, it is just sitting there and getting that person, because fundamentally, as people, we know what we need to know before we need to know it. And quite often we choose not to pay attention to the information that's around us or given to us. So if you think about all of the times that you've had a member of staff that has just become a less easy journey to work with, but actually, if you were to reflect back, right back to the very beginning, in the majority of cases, they will have shown you How many relationships have we been in, you know, as people, where it's ended up not good because of somebody else's behaviour or our own behaviour? And actually the behaviour was there from day one. We just chose not to see it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, I'll let it slide, maybe.
Yeah, and that's another big thing, isn't it, in around team morale, is actually if you've not been upskilled and you don't know how to handle those difficult conversations, is actually that very quickly breeds a poor culture within your workplace, and then that spirals before you can deal with it, because actually that one bad person has affected everybody, and then people get into that negative mindset of, well, if they're getting away with it, then I'll also do it, or that I don't feel valued because I do it above and beyond, but actually this person never does it, or they always turn up, or whatever that issue is, and it just breeds that kind of poor culture that you definitely don't want.
I think that's where values-based leadership is really key. The fact that the business has values, the fact that everybody buys into those values, the fact that everybody knows what those values look, sound, feel, and are like to think about, and that they all know it is absolutely fine and okay to say when those values are not being adhered to in a business without fear of reprisal.
And I guess that leads into what Nick's just asked. So he's put, how much of nurturing and empowering employee resilience do you think is about creating an environment for staff to fail safely?
It's really key. Psychological safety is just one of the, I think it's one of the higher indicators even before pay. I need to be safe to be me. I need to be safe to know that if something goes wrong, I'm not going to lose my job. I need to be safe to express an opinion in a polite and courteous way without thinking that, you know, somebody's going to then go and stab me in the back, for example. And I think it's also around, it's things like money and strategy and actually that kind of stability, more about responsiveness, not reactiveness. Because if staff fail and then they see a negative response to that, then they're less likely for something to then say again. So I saw something the other day on another social media platform, and it was actually a parent tool that you can use with your children, and it was like that, having like I'm going to call it a boop word, right? Just a random name for a word, and it's a word that can be used to pre-frame a conversation that needs to happen. So if we were to email somebody and say, I need to have a conversation with you tomorrow, that we know full well that person's going to sit there and worry about what that conversation's about without any context in it. Yeah. So if you think about it from a kid's perspective, if a kid needs to say something to their parent and they're fearing the response, so obviously they don't feel that they're in a space to fail safely, if they can pre-frame something and have an agreement with the parent to say, I don't know, custard, like something kind of fun and childlike for the child, then the parent knows, okay, I need to center myself and be prepared for this conversation that I might find less easy, so that the parent then doesn't react. They can respond and go, okay, thanks for telling me about that. What do we need to do about that? And I think if we relate that to services and to people, how can we ensure that we put an environment around people so that they can fail safely? So there needs to be a pre-frame, I think, around that to say, I need to tell you something that you might not like. So could you just take a seat for me, please? Do you know what I mean? Or some sort of narrative that's safe for people to be able to say. And when something goes wrong, it's about that culture of learning, not blaming.
And I was about to say, it links back to our conversation earlier around the new framework of actually that culture of learning. And actually and it's probably a bit around that reflection that we spoke about earlier. Actually, in that investigation, you're going to have to look at what role did you play within that. And you are right. I know that I've worked for services before where somebody might make a medication error. They go through a disciplinary or they put on a performance plan, and then they make that error again. but they hide it or they cover it up, and because they don't want that repercussion, and they try and get away with it, or they sign the Mars chart even though they haven't given it and dispose it. We know that those kind of things happen within social care, and you're absolutely right. We do need to create a way that actually staff feel that they're able to be open and honest. Faye, what would you say to Nick's question here?
Yeah, I completely agree. So we do a lot of mock inspections, and we're doing them under the new framework, obviously now. And we've found, unfortunately, there is a lot of blame culture in the sector. And yeah, we find things where staff are hiding mistakes, and it's like, why have there been no safeguardings raised when X, Y, and Z happened? Or why is the incidents tracker you haven't done anything with it? Because people aren't actually reporting the mistakes that they've made, because at the top they say, well, we know that there's going to be consequences for this, which is such an awful thing to hear from care staff, when they should be, like you say, empowered to be able to fail safely and put their hand up and say, I've messed up, I need help. I don't know how to do this, or it was just a mistake. I do know how to do it. I followed the process. It won't happen again. And it's, again, goes back to that starting at that top, that management level, to create that culture.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I do is, the second that in my workplace, the second I know there's a mistake or something's happened, it's okay, that's fine, we can investigate it. But actually, how are we going to put steps into place to prevent that happening? It's already happened. There's nothing we can do about that. And as long as nobody's died, then actually, we can then work with that. Obviously, it's a different story if you've killed somebody, but actually, you're not going to be able to change what's happened. You want those staff to be able to tell you, and then you want to be able to put steps in place to actually prevent that from happening again or mitigating it again.
And then it's, empowering them and figuring out how that person learns. Okay, they've made this mistake once or twice, so they're obviously not picking up how to do this thing. How do they learn? Do they need to watch videos? Do they need it in writing? Do they need to do it with somebody? I do it, we do it, you do it. And empowering that kind of culture.
No, absolutely. Go on, Lucy.
I think there's also something really key, and I'll be quick here, around resilience. Resilience is great, but resilient things break because they're strong. If we were to approach things from kind of more of an anti-fragility mindset, where something gets more strong with whatever knocks and bumps it has. So if we're able to take a service where things have gone wrong and we're able to deal with it out without judgment, and it's just feedback, and we're going to grow from that, then that will make us stronger. And then the next thing will happen, and that will make us stronger. And that actually creates an anti-fragility kind of mindset, which means that the service will take whatever bump, whatever safeguarding, whatever happens. You know what? Okay, fine. This has happened. What can we do? How can we move forward?
No, definitely. Got 2 questions. I'm conscious of time, so I'll have to be quick. So we spoke earlier around measuring the effectiveness. So Faye, you spoke around actually going back to your staff and working out what's working well, what could be put in better. What initiatives do you both have that we haven't spoken about, how you measure the effectiveness of maybe that plan that you're putting in place, or something that you've already got in place? Lucy, I'll come to you first.
Well, I have 2 things. So I've just written a wellbeing survey, which is on 10 separate areas, and there's a whole load of questions. So we're going to be rolling this out over the next however many months, when I've got my head around the tech element, where there's a collection of questionnaires, and we'll be able to score that. And then I have another questionnaire which actually staff look at, and it's around recognition, people, purpose, that kind of stuff. And then we look at it as a yes, no, or maybe, and I collate how many yeses, how many no's, and we look at the areas that are kind of more predominantly no's, and we focus on that, and then we can redo it in a few months' time.
No, definitely. Thank you. And we've run out of time to talk about recognition and reward, and I think it's such a vital part of what we've spoken about tonight. So I have to definitely do a follow-up on that area alone. Faye, anything from you around measuring effectiveness?
Yeah, surveys, absolutely. And then I have a whole section in my one-to-ones about a wellbeing check-in. So every month with employees, yes, we'll go through what's going well, what are your goals for the next 30, 60, 90 days, how's it been, all those kind of things. And then we just talk about wellbeing. How's your work-life balance? Do you feel supported from me as a manager? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like do you need anything else? Is there all those kind of different things? And because we've already got that as a young business, that culture of openness, and people are just really open about their mental well-being. Sorry, I'm really conscious of time. That helps, and that tracks it. And then the work that they do with Lucy, we can see, you know, Lucy will feed back to me with consent. This is where they're at now. These are the kind of tasks and homework that they've had. And I can then see just in the quality of work and the smile on the face on the team huddles and all those different kind of things that the difference that it's making. And we always like, so we have like little teams meetings. So anytime anything's gone well, we're all in the teams meetings, like doing little gifts, celebrating each other, just like, yay, well done, you did an amazing thing. And like everyone loves a bit of praise, don't they? Like it really boosts morale.
I did see something the other day around teams in a company, and it wasn't social care, which I thought was a really interesting concept, was around that they empower their staff. If they're in a meeting and they're not getting anything from it, that they can just leave, which I think is a very completely new concept. But actually, the amount of times that we are in meetings where it might be the same conversation, or actually allowing your staff to say, actually, I already know this, I'm not getting any value from it, let me go and do something that I can use my time more wisely or effectively.
Yeah, we do that. I have a habit of just talking over, like I set an hour twice a week for a huddle, and it always goes into like an hour and a half, so everyone knows now not to book meetings. Not very efficient, but then sometimes people go, Faye, I need to go, I ain't got time for all this weekend chat. And we have like because we all work remotely, so we don't really see each other in person often, as often as I'd like. So we have a team social club on a Friday, and it's like, you are welcome to come. It's at 3:00, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. You know, it's entirely up to you, and it's just a nice open space to do non-work things, and maybe come with a drink, and we do quizzes and games and stuff like that, and that's really, really good for team morale. Great way to enter the weekend.
And I'm pleased you said there around actually it's at 3:00, because I think a lot of organisations do it at the weekend, do it in the evening outside of that person's time, and then they don't pay them. And I think, well, no wonder your team aren't engaged, because one, it's in their own personal time. Two, if you're not paying them, you know, it's all well and good for acting on, you know, goodwill and people giving their own time, but you need to, comes back to that reward and recognition that we spoke about earlier very briefly. Last question before I let you both go. I mean, I could talk all night, but I'm very conscious of that you've given up your evening to join me.
I think I'll probably talk longer.
We'll be here till midnight.
I think Lucy definitely would.
I wanted to give a shout out, because I still speak to a number of managers that aren't aware of either of these services that can support. So we've obviously got the Care Workers charity that support with mental health and wellbeing grants. And we've also got Grace Cares that also support, and I'll share their link in a minute. Is there any resources that you can signpost that are free to access? Because I'm conscious there will be a number of care providers out there that won't get the funds from their directors, from the business owners, that want to do more and want to help signpost their staff.
So ideally, if they are a good business, and I don't mean rating, I mean as in good as in following the rules, they will have a thing called insurance. And a lot of insurance companies are actually providing support as part of the insurance package. So what I would say to the company is, see what you've got in your insurance policy. You might find that there's something in there that you didn't know was there. And that won't cost you anything because you've already paid for it.
And I think that's a really interesting thing, because we had somebody from insurance join us, must have been about 4 weeks ago, and actually they spoke about that there's so many things in your insurance premium that you won't realise are there to actually go through the T's and C's. And again, it probably comes back because there's probably somebody that's dealing with that side of the business that the registered manager might not even know about. Mm-hmm. I guess that plan that we spoke about earlier, it's involving everybody in that, so that actually you're drawing on all angles of the business. Mm-hmm. Faye, any external support that you can think of for signposting?
Lucy. I'm not, but yeah. And then I'm thinking of some like other free things. So there's an app called Dailyo. I'll put it in the chat. Honestly, it is just such a good way to check in with yourself, and it's great. It really is, because we just let the days go by sometimes, don't we? And then wake up one day and we feel not great. So that's just a way to go, oh, this time of the month I was sad because this happened, because I didn't drink enough water, and all those kind of different things. Really recommend that to anybody. It's great.
No, thank you very much. And I've just popped their website into the comments, along with the Care Workers charity and Grace Cares. Before I let you both go, where can anybody that wants to follow up on this conversation, wants to implement either of your services and feel free to plug away. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a website. So LJB Coach Consultancy. So yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place. Just search for me by my name. And actually, somebody told me the other day, one of the members of staff with the business I'm working with, they went, "I Googled you." I was like, okay.
Nice.
And they'd literally just gone on into the net and put in like my name, and I just popped up. So yeah, you know what? If you're stuck, just pop me into the internet, because apparently I just pop up. Who knew?
A good way of knowing that you're verified as well.
Don't you ever Google yourself? Do you just type in your name into Google?
I tell people to do it all the time.
Amazing.
And I use it with my, I mean, it's a separate conversation, but I use it with my kids just to show the power of like actually where your image, where your name ends up. Once you're on like the internet, when they're adamant they want to start a YouTube channel of their own or something, and I'm like, absolutely not.
No.
Faye, where can people find you?
So catacare.co.uk, that's the main website. There's a little contact us page on there. We're having a bit of a review at the moment of the website, but there's most of the things that we do on the website. Same LinkedIn, just type in Faye Mel into Google, I'm there. Yeah, that's about it. Facebook, I think I'm there as well. Don't use it much, but I'm definitely there. But yeah, the website is probably the best place. I'll link to.
No, thank you very much. And obviously you can find all of our shows, our podcasts at thecaringview.co.uk. Just a shout out to our sponsors again. So we have got Prosperwell, the leading digital marketing agency. Their website's there on the screen. We've got CBAT Training Associates, that again, website's on the screen and you can find out more there. And I know that they do training around resilience and mental health as well, which you might want to implement as well as something else and complement it. And you've also got Attis Care by Attis Insurance Brokers. And again, if you're looking for new insurance, Lucy spoke there actually around, there might be mental health support available in your insurance. So be sure to ask that question when you're looking around. Just wanted to say thank you both of you for giving up your evening and talking about this. There's so many more questions that I had written down, so much more that we could have spoken about, but we'll definitely have to follow up on the recognition and reward angle, because I definitely think that plays a huge part into kind of how we value and how our employees feel valued. Any final thoughts from either of you before I close out?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that actually can make a massive difference. Pleases and thank yous, trays of tea, a box of biscuits, or a box of heroes. And actually, it's simple stuff like that that means loads to people.
Absolutely. The power of saying thank you.
And
Faye,
I think,
any closing words?
Yeah, I think, most people in care are quite intuitive and we're observant. And I think that as a manager, I think, identify, just have a look at your team. You can tell if something's going on and then identify it. And such a great session, spent the last hour nodding at my laptop.
I had to be I thought nodding, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, is he nodding? I think falling asleep.
Yeah, and just taking 5 minutes to ask, how are you? How are you doing? How are you actually doing? I don't think there's enough of that. We all say it, don't we? Hi, hope you're well. Hi, how is it going? But actually ask the question and create that culture of openness. And yeah, your staff will look after your business.
Absolutely. And I do empower anybody that next time somebody asks how they're doing to just say that they're not doing okay and open that conversation if they're not doing okay. And more so if you are a registered manager and you don't have support. And I always say to people, as horrible as this sounds, actually, if you're honest with the owners, with your managers, and nothing happens, you know what kind of company you're working for, you know kind of where they value you. And I always say that if you left, they'd replace you tomorrow. If you drop down dead, they'd replace you tomorrow. And actually, you need to know that you're working for somebody that really values you and values your mental health. Well, thank you both of you for joining us. If anybody wants to contact you, please do. If you struggle to find Faye or Lucy, either on Google, LinkedIn, or their websites, please do just drop us a message on the Caring View or reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will signpost you. And the only thing I would say is that Lucy and Faye, like me, are great at just being able to talk to people. I know that they have a lot of time for signposting. So it might be there's something that we've discussed tonight or something that's thought-provoking and has kind of twigged in your mind and you want to know more. So please do reach out to any of us and we can support. But for now, thank you very much. This has been The Caring View, and have a good evening. Goodbye.
Bye.